Coming up in this video,
we need to name racism, we need to
name racism. I'll name racism. You, the guy that said white people can't be discriminated against based on the colour of their skin, you asshole. This man, he's got a dictionary full of these weasel words, which is quite appropriate because he certainly resembles a weasel. If we label one of your thoughts as a misconception, then you've got faulty thinking. Your thinking's just not right. Well, I don't want to have faulty thinking. I better take all my opinions from the Race Discrimination Commissar. Whilst white people can experience multiple forms of discrimination, they cannot experience racism. So allow me to educate you with some examples of white people being the victims of racist attacks. Recent killing of Iryna Zarutska, whose killer proudly stated, "I got that white girl," after he stabbed her. He was stabbed at least 13 times before being doused with petrol and set on fire while still alive. And the Human Rights Commission say white people cannot experience racism. So who holds the power there? Well, clearly the Pakistani racists hold the power. Isn't that a racist power imbalance? A taxpayer-funded bailout was needed to rescue this financially unsustainable public office. Are a bunch of deceitful parasites. All this shows is the incredible tolerance of white people. A tolerance which is running out. So we have a race discrimination commissioner, in fact we've got an entire government department, who believe that white people are never discriminated against because of their skin colour. Not only that, but they're using our taxes to push that lie onto the public. From the noticer, Anglo-Celtic community calls for apology from Race Discrimination Commissioner. Australia's leading Anglo-Celtic advocacy group has called on the Race Discrimination Commissioner to apologise for publishing a statement saying white people cannot experience racism. Indian-born bureaucrat Giridharan Sivaraman, who's paid $408,000 a year in taxpayer funds by the Australian Human Rights Commission, included the claim in a Common Myths and Misconceptions About Racism guide that accompanies his National Anti-Racism Framework. An explainer in the guide produced by Mr. Sivaraman states, whilst white people can experience multiple forms of discrimination or prejudice based on gender, sexual orientation, ability, age or class, they cannot experience racism. White people cannot experience racism. Now, as soon as I read that, I could immediately think of a whole bunch of examples of white people experiencing racism. For example, the recent killing of Iryna Zarutska, whose killer proudly stated, "I got that white girl," after he stabbed her. And the murder of Kriss Donald, who was chosen at random by a group of British Pakistani men who were looking specifically for white people to kill. His death was brutal, as I've covered in full before. They tortured him for hours, stabbing him at least 13 times before pouring petrol on him and setting him on fire while he was still alive. But hey, these Muppets are preaching to us that white people can't experience racism. So I decided to write to these grifting bunch of chancers, pointing out real-life examples of racism against whites, and I'll read you that email in full a little later. This guy, Giridharan Sivaraman, and also the president of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Hugh de Kretser, they also fronted a Senate committee in which they gave fluffy buzzword answers to what I thought were some pretty straightforward questions about that statement of theirs.
It is available on the AHRC website, explicitly says that we all live and participate in a racist system. Commissioner, do you think Australia is a racist country?
I think that racism significantly affects systems and institutions in Australia, and that's something that we need to combat to make our society better for everyone.
We must combat systemic racism within institutions, and really the key to this is to pay me $400,000 a year.
President, do you think Australia is a racist country?
I think if you look at the founding of Australia, it was founded by colonisation, where the rights of First Peoples were blatantly ignored, and we still haven't come to terms with that.
This man, he's got a dictionary full of these weasel words, which is quite appropriate because he certainly resembles a weasel. Oh, the colonisation was bad and we have to make amends. By the way, this one, he is on $500,000 a year. And if he truly believed in all of this nonsense about colonisation still holding people back today, then he wouldn't be taking $500,000 a year salary. He'd be doing this for minimum wage or as a volunteer, and he'd be donating the salary to the peoples of the colours. That's the test. If there was no money to be made in this, would he even bother? If they had to work a hard day's graft, would they go home and use their few hours of free time to peddle this crap as a hobby or out of pure passion in exchange for no salary? No way would they. That's the test. Frauds. I go to work. Then, when I'm not working, I use my spare time to look into our corrupt public service. And we could really do with a few more of the actual paid journalists doing the same. See, we, you and I, have to fight these people in our spare time, while going out and busting our ass in our day jobs for much less money than them. They get paid a fortune by us taxpayers to fight against us. And here are all their salaries. Look at how many of them there are, these senior staff within the AHRC. Hugh there saying 480,000, but that's actually for slightly less than a year. So next year, if he does a full year, it'll be over $500,000. Here they all are. It's the President, Commissioners and Chief Executive over the 2024-25 period. A party of clowns, highly paid clowns. This is a bunch of people whose massive salaries depend on perpetual grievance. They have to maintain it. I wouldn't care if this collection of scam artists set up their own little club, funded it themselves, made their own website and peddled this crap on it. I'd call it free speech. But we pay them a lot of money for this. Their work is fraudulent. It's designed to scam money out of the taxpayer. And and when it matters, they, the Human Rights Commission, they go missing. Do you remember the lockdowns in Melbourne? Cops shooting us in the back with rubber bullets? Because that's obviously how you protect against COVID. You shoot people who are running away from you in the back. That's COVID safe. Where was the Human Rights Commission then? There was silence from them, not a peep. Not until a few years later, when they opened up some tokenistic review of lockdowns and they started to accept submissions from the public. This was years after the fact. So not only are they all grifters, but they're cowards. You think with the weasel words coming from them at that hearing, that they are really going to seriously investigate our complaints about government and police actions during COVID?
Australian taxpayers are paying you a considerable salary at this estimates. Are those Australian taxpayers racists?
Senator, I don't know if that's a helpful
Avoid the question,
I think
you
what taxpayers
fucking
would
worm.
want to see, like all Australians, is a society where everyone can be themselves, can flourish and can thrive. To get to that point, we need to name racism. We need to
name racism. I'll name racism. You, the guy that said white people can't be discriminated against based on the colour of their skin. You asshole.
That same explainer for the National Anti-Racism Framework explicitly says it is a myth that white people can experience racism. Do you agree with that statement?
I think that it's important to look at that explainer as a whole, not just taking one sentence out. But the important thing to note is that racism is rarely about any biological construct or the colour. It can be about the colour of someone's skin, but it is about the way in which power might be wielded by one person over another. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
It's the way power might be wielded by one person over another. Yeah, like the ex-Scottish First Minister who wielded his power to guilt-trip the majority white Scottish population for being born as white. So yeah, it is possible for whites to be the victims of this racism. And I hate the word racism anyway. I find it irrelevant. How about we just acknowledge that people are sometimes dicks to each other, whether it's skin colour related or not. I mean, I think this guy's a dick, and I would have happily have left it as that, but if we are to apply his own logic, then we can classify him as being racist.
Race is the child, racism is the father. It's often created as a means of oppression, and in this country, in Australia, it has tended to be towards people who are not white. That's the important thing to recognise. Oh, his peoples are so oppressed, and the whitey is so mean, yet somehow he can climb the ladder and grab a 400 grand a year job, talk down to us plebs, and that's just how privileged we are. Fucking dick. Fucking asshole. But like all government departments, they throw all these bullshit stats into their annual reports to make it look like they actually do things. Look at all our statistics here. Complaints received, complaints finalised. Look at the numbers. I go through a lot of these government department annual reports and they really do fluff it out with a load of pointless stuff. It's like a uni kid waffling on to get their word count up in their essay. Oh, and check out this one. The finalisation of legacy COVID-19 complaints continues to contribute to the lower conciliation rate. In 24 to 25, the Commission finalised 281 COVID-19 related complaints, of which only 2% were resolved through conciliation. This is largely due to complaint subject matter actions of government and very entrenched complaint party views. This is them saying that we're just being difficult. Did they not see what the government was doing to us? Typical public servants, they'll go along with anything. They were getting their salaries paid. We experienced a significant drop in the number of COVID-19 related complaints in the second half of 24-25, indicating that this trend is likely to abate. Wow. So they're forecasting that complaints about COVID lockdown are going to continue to drop into the next year. Wow. Geniuses. We delivered workshops and we did e-courses and 70 agencies purchased courses and 3,000 people did the course. And I guarantee you the majority of them were other public sector organisations spending taxpayer money to buy their courses, and they'll put that income through as just earned income. Nothing to do with the taxpayer. That's how they shuffle this money around and disguise it. We were very active on social media. Look at all the engagement we got. People were really engaging with us. Yeah, they were probably calling you out on your bullshit. We made 36 YouTube videos and we're now up to 11,000 subscribers. Well done, guys. It's almost as much as me. With the millions you get in funding, I'm sure you can overtake me soon. And here is the YouTube page. 27 views, 35 views. Fantastic work, guys. You're doing really, really well. I wonder how much they pay for these cartoon animations that get 200-300 views each. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter when the taxpayer's going to foot the bill. That's actually how it works within the public service. And I've said before, I've worked in the public service a lot in my past. There's no incentive to stick to a budget or to justify spend. You go over budget, you'll get bailed out. I've just realised, I bet you they've got a dedicated social media manager and it's their full-time job to do all this crap. But wait a moment, let's think of this from their perspective. Maybe this is pure 5D chess from the AHRC. They make racist comments against white people. White people complain to the Human Rights Commission about the racism of the Human Rights Commission. Their complaint statistics go up and they can close off all those complaints. Then they can demand more funding to address all of the complaints being made about them.
Look at all the complaints of human rights breaches. We really have to investigate them all. You better give us more funding. Talking of funding, and I know I still have to read you the email I've sent them. Talking of funding, last year they got 32 million from the government, and they say their own source income was 14 million. Now that 14 million, I would believe that a good chunk of that would come from other government departments. Say that they're paying to do a training course through the AHRC, or they might need to get a report written by the AHRC and get their stamp put on it. So it looks like they earned that money themselves, but no, a lot of that would have come from other government departments, things that we fund. But I'll also concede there could be some of that came from private companies. Private companies who, for whatever reason, need some sort of report from the AHRC with that AHRC logo on it saying they approve. And they'll pay for that, but they will make sure that what they are paying for is written the way they want it to further whatever their cause is. I also found out that in 2021 they got a $16 million equity injection because they had cash flow issues. An equity injection. And that came from the taxpayer, of course. What amazing wordplay. So they have cash flow issues because they failed to manage their resources. But they can fork out 400 grand a year to that clown, and similar amounts for the rest of the court jesters. Do you really think Australia would look much different without this department? If anything, I think it would be better. How many employees have they got? Alright, so you've got these 9. We don't count the first one because she was replaced by the Weasel. And then there's another 2 senior execs there. And then the ongoing employees, we've got 27 male, 126 female. It's not very equal, is it? Equality. It's not very equal. And we've got one of whatever they are, I don't know, a giraffe, 154. And then the non-ongoing, again, you've got 11 male, 61 female, equality. One of these, it's probably a cat that has its own litter tray underneath its desk at work, 73. 238. 238 employees. I say sack them all. Sack them all, close the department, give them all unemployment benefits. Let them sit at home and live off the dole. You work out how much that is. There you go. I just saved Australia millions every year. It took me minutes. Don't worry, I'm coming to the email soon. So they have one of these propaganda pieces full of cartoons and flashy graphics designed to brainwash children and simple-minded adults with their message. This is the setup in the introduction for the brainwashing to come. What do we mean by myth? Well, a myth is a widely held but false belief or idea. What do we mean by misconception? A belief or idea that is incorrect because it is based on faulty thinking or understanding. So, if we label one of your thoughts as a misconception, then you've got faulty thinking. Your thinking's just not right. Well, I don't want to have faulty thinking. I better take all my opinions from the Race Discrimination Commissar. Then we see it in action. They title each section using the word myth or misconception. So they've already told you it's a myth or a misconception before you've even read it. It is highly suggestive and manipulative. The misconception that racism is about individual actions and beliefs. The myth of meritocracy. Someone told you that a meritocracy is a fair system? Well, that's a myth. So before you read any further, the title has told you the facts. It's a myth. The people who this nonsense damages the most is ironically the lower class non-whites. They embrace this stuff and it sucks ambition out of them. It gives them excuse for any failure. It leaves them unable to cope with life's challenges. Who does it benefit? It benefits a small amount of elitist browns, like, what's his name? and elitist whites who identify as non-white due to some tiny percentage of their distant ancestry being a persons of colours. And it benefits some of these grifter whites like El Presidente who play the political buzzword game to land these jobs. That's who benefits from this. It's not wee Jimmy growing up in a tin shed in the outback. What's his name? What is his name? Giridharan. Do you know he's one of those voice treaty truth people? I found a photo. Remember that awful song? I'm at the Yes Walk in Sydney, and plenty of people are saying that this is just hobby activism for the white bourgeoisie, but clearly not the case.
It's a choice of voice treated true. It's a choice of voice treated true. Voice treated true. Voice treated true.
The misconception of not seeing race. The myth that racism is a thing of the past. Well, it's certainly alive and well now due to these grifters. And that's just it, isn't it? If the public aren't convinced that there's racism everywhere, then these people can't justify their positions. See how they use language to control the ability to think? Anyway, let me read my email. I hope you get a kick out of it. Hello. I write to you today in disbelief at what my taxes are funding through your department. In particular, I find your propaganda to be misleading, even damaging to the minds of the public, and I call into question the value to the taxpayer in employing the Race Discrimination Commissioner on a salary of over $400,000 plus benefits, given that he is either incompetent, ill-intentioned, or both. While I have many disappointments in the AHRC, on this occasion I draw your attention to the 5 common myths and misconceptions about racism PDF on the AHRC website, and the President and the Race Discrimination Commissioner appearances at the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee on 7 October 2025. The following statement can be found within the PDF and was discussed at the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee. Whilst white people can experience multiple forms of discrimination or prejudice based on gender, sexual orientation, ability, age, or class, they cannot experience racism. I am not sure if this statement was made from a position of simple-minded ignorance or if the author is conscious of the lies that they are pushing. So allow me to educate you with some examples of white people being the victims of racist attacks. Example 1. Kriss Donald was murdered on 15th March 2004 by a group of British Pakistani men. This became the first ever conviction for a racially motivated murder in Scotland. Having had an altercation at a nightclub which left their egos bruised, the men went out in a stolen car with a collection of weapons, which included a hammer, screwdriver and knives. They were specifically looking for white people and snatched 15-year-old Kriss Donald, 15-year-old, and they attempted but failed to grab his friend Jamie Wallace. Neither of these kids were connected to the earlier altercation at the nightclub. The full details of the torture and slow death of Kriss are horrific. He was stabbed at least 13 times before being doused with petrol and set on fire while still alive. And the Human Rights Commission say white people cannot experience racism. The Scotsman newspaper reported the final moments of Kriss's life as follows. The will to live was strong enough in Kriss Donald that he struggled up, staggered away from the tree trunk and tried to reach the grass slope that led to the walkway path. He died rolling in a muddy hollow in a futile attempt to extinguish the flames. I wonder if Kriss Donald could feel the racism as he rolled in that puddle trying to put the flames out with his 13 stab wounds. Giridharan would have debated Kriss in that moment, telling him that it's really unfortunate that this has happened to you, but it's definitely not racism. It's also worth noting how the white community in Scotland reacted to this. Was there riots in the streets? Was there revenge murders? No, nothing of the sort. Endless tolerance from the white man. Examples 2 and 3. Similar to the above was the murder of Ross Parker, 17 at the time of his death. His attackers had been prowling the streets looking for a white male to attack. And the murder of 15-year-old Richard Everitt, another incident where a group of non-white men, feeling aggrieved over a separate incident, felt justified in attacking a random white. And the Australian Human Rights Commission say white people cannot experience racism. Example 4. More recently was the brutal murder of Iryna Zarutska, stabbed from behind as she sat on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. The killer proudly proclaiming afterwards, "I got that white girl." And the Australian Human Rights Commission say white people cannot experience racism. And then, when they are challenged on that, they produce a salad of buzzwords about power struggles and privilege. Privilege? I call holding a 400 grand a year paper shuffling job a privilege. And you want to talk power and privilege? I didn't even mention the Pakistani gangs of Rotherham, the grooming gangs who preyed on young girls for decades, and the cops and the government officials were all aware of it, but they did not speak out due to fear of being called racist. So who holds the power there? Well, clearly the Pakistani hold the power. Isn't that a racist power imbalance? These are only a handful of examples. Show me an instance of an Indian in Australia being bound, tortured, burned alive by a white guy, and I will loudly condemn it, and I'll call it racist. And I would be quite vocal in calling for the murderer to be executed. Somehow, I don't think the Race Discrimination Commissioner or your President would do the same for a white victim. Not only am I disgusted at the ignorance of the highly paid AHRC President and the Race Discrimination Commissioner, but I find it disappointing that none of the staff at the AHRC have challenged this propaganda and spoken out publicly. However, I am not surprised, as I have come to experience myself when working within the public service, that there are very few employees of integrity. Most simply aim to secure the next paycheck, even if they see flaws and hypocrisy within the system. The tax-paying public are growing restless at race-baiting, tax dollar-wasting public servants. While I do believe there is a place for a Human Rights Commission, I do not believe in the intentions of the current leadership beyond that of their desire to pay their mortgage and book their next holiday. Similarly, I do not hold much faith in the staff who would support these leaders. I cannot comprehend how you can justify paying over $900,000 a year combined for the Commissioner and President, given that only a few years ago an equity injection, or what I call a taxpayer-funded bailout, was needed to rescue this financially unsustainable public office. As I said, I'm not happy that my taxes support your organisation, but there's very little I can do about it. I sincerely hope it is not long before your gravy train is derailed. Yours, I, malcontent. Most of them, the AHRC employees, will be getting paid more than you and I. And with all the luxuries and benefits that a public servant gets, yet it's us who are full of privilege. and especially the straight white males, they are a bunch of deceitful parasites living off the hard-working taxpayer. Qualities like honesty and integrity, or holding ourselves to a high standard, dealing with adversity as life often throws at you, not pointing the finger at others for your own misfortunes or for your own shortcomings, all while these clowns play the victim while living the high life. I mean, if anything, all this shows is the incredible tolerance of white people, particularly the white working class. A tolerance which is running out.